Well, we had that breaking news we brought you just before the break, and this is that sanctions and the trade relationship with China is slowly starting to improve. On the winners list today is the citrus fruit industry. Let's go live to the Nationals leader, David Littleproud now. David, this news just in, but certainly it's another good sign and particularly good for these growers.
Yeah, a welcome development and incremental improvement in our relationship with China, particularly around some of the quarantine restrictions and tariff restrictions. The big test still, but is wine. There's $1.2 billion that was stripped out of the wine industry with no other real market to send it to. That was lost overnight. So it's important, and the conversations I've had with the Chinese ambassador in Canberra is that really will be the signal of real intent, that they intend to work cooperatively with us. I congratulate the government on the dialogue they've had, and I think they've kept the line. They kept the line that we started and made sure that our sovereignty was protected. But China, if they were to move on wine, would signal a very big intent of shifting the relationship back to mutual respect. And I think hopefully the Trade Minister can continue to move on that trajectory, because that's the real industry that hurt the most out of the economic coercion that China imposed on Australian producers.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, wine is the one to watch here, but this today, an incremental step. Let's talk IR now, because what people are going to be seeing is a lot of ad campaigns, and this is businesses, large and small, the mining industry, but also farmers that are worried about this second tranche of changes. What's the problem here?
Well, it's about fairness. It's about reward for effort. And unfortunately, you can have somebody that might be working on a farm or in a factory or on a construction site for 6 years, but someone who just walks in, is started with no experience, and in 6 months be on the same pay. There's no premise around showing initiative, showing a reward for effort, and being rewarded for that. You take away one of the mechanisms that businesses have to reward their employees financially in differentiating them for their efforts in the workforce. And that's just something that I think tears away at the very heart of our society and what has driven productivity. And when you look at what the RBA governor said in his speech last week, one of the big concerns he has around our economy at the moment is productivity. And this won't improve productivity. This will just reward people who don't have the experience and, in fact, push more money into the economy without the productivity gains to offset it. So this is where we just need to take a deep breath. The government needs to engage with industry openly about this and understand this is a big ideological change of our workforce. While it might sound good to everybody, just understand the consequences of this, because if you don't get those productivity gains, what businesses invariably do is they don't employ as many people because they can't afford to pay for it. So we need to get the balance right, and this is where the government needs to listen to industry groups from NFF right through to COSBOA and the Minerals Council to make sure they get the balance right in this, and they don't strip away that reward for effort, that fairness in those that want to go out and do that bit extra and being able to be rewarded by their employees for doing it.
Yeah, we're going to hear from some of these groups a little later this hour as well, and next. In fact, let's talk about The Voice now. Another poll today shows that it's waning. But for the first time, this news poll shows that most people would vote no, or it's at least dipped under 50%. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, look, all that Anthony Albanese's managed to do in his 12 months as Prime Minister is drive up everyone's cost of living and divide the nation. I'm just pleading to the Prime Minister, now is the time for him to inject himself with leadership, to appreciate that if he separated the question, that if this was just about constitutional recognition, I'm sure not only would there be bipartisan support, I think there'd be overwhelming support in Australia to support that premise. But to intertwine another layer of bureaucracy, one in which he won't even provide the details that's showing to be divisive, but also the risks that are there in terms of lawyers, eminent lawyers from both sides, saying that this will go to the High Court, and that's really how lawyers always have differing opinions arbitrated. But particularly when he runs the Parliament and he's not prepared to put the legislation or the mechanics of the voice in front of the Parliament, but more importantly, in front of the Australian people. It says the Prime Minister isn't prepared to bring the Australian people into his trust. So why would the Australian people trust him to vote for it? And I think this is where he needs to step up. But the real opportunity here is for the Prime Minister, and I plead with him, separate the question. Put a question about constitutional recognition in its isolation from the voice, and let Australians have a unifying moment rather than one that what he's created that is dividing this nation. And I think it's important that as political leaders we create that environment for him to be able to do that. And if he does that sensibly, then there is a pathway forward. But as he's going at the moment, he will divide the country. And while he's done that, he's lost sight of everyone's cost of living.
All right, David Littleproud, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much as always.
Thanks for having me.